Many of you will be familiar with the religion of Scientology. High-profile documentaries by Alex Gibney and Louis Theroux and a series by actress Leah Remini has painted an image of the religion as a bizarre, sinister and secretive organisation that uses aggressive tactics to prevent ex-members from revealing its innermost secrets. My first guest, Pete Griffiths, was a Scientologist for 20 years before a penny-dropping moment prompted him to leave it. He recently had an injunction lifted that had effectively prevented him from attending protests against the religion. So good afternoon, Pete.
Good afternoon, Nathan.
Thank you very much for coming in.
You're more than welcome. I'm happy to be here.
Now, we'll get on to the court proceedings. We'll get on to your experiences as a Scientologist and Scientology in Ireland. But first, maybe for those who don't know anything about Scientology, could you give just a very brief, basic introduction to Scientology?
The basic introduction is Scientology claims to be a religion. It isn't. It didn't start as a religion. The founder certainly wrote in a book in 1954, Scientology is not psychotherapy and it's not a religion. Now, he changed his mind as time went on, and most of the decisions he seemed to make were like knee-jerk reactions to solve problems that he himself had created. So calling it a religion is the latest thing. They've been doing it for quite a while, actually. It's not the latest thing. But in my opinion, it's not a religion. Having said all that, they believe that man is an immortal spiritual being with unlimited potential, and if you only do Scientology, all that will be yours on a plate at a price.
Because, I mean, it's a very modern religion, if we'll call it that.
We can call it religion in inverted commas, yeah.
Religion in inverted commas, because it's very modern. It was created in the 1950s, and L. Ron Hubbard was a science fiction writer.
He was indeed.
So he uses all of the tropes of science fiction as the sort of the myths that underpin the religion.
Well, he does. But here's the thing. You don't find that out until you've been in it for a while and you've ascended various levels or steps and they deem you trustworthy enough to find this out. So we are talking about the secret part of Scientology that they don't really want you to know about. And you can tell exactly how far a Scientologist is along that path when they say, oh, well, yeah, some of what he says is true, but I've never heard that other stuff ever. Well, of course they haven't, because it's kept from them. But it also tells you that that Scientologist doesn't know about that stuff at this point. Apparently, if you hear about it, you get pneumonia and die. That's what L. Ron Hubbard told his members. To date, I don't think anybody has. So.
Okay, so...
and that's the Xenu stuff, the volcanoes, the South Park. I don't know if anyone has watched the South Park episode. It's all that stuff, basically.
Okay, so it sounds like it's ripe for satire then.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Now, you were involved with Scientology for 20 years, so how did that come about?
Well, it wasn't Scientology that I got involved with. The way they do it is they have things called, like we call them front groups. I prefer to think of it as the propaganda wing. And they have all these aspects of themselves where they try to make themselves appear as normal as possible. I believe they've got actually a Scientology Santa next week at the place in Fair House. They've had Halloween with apple dunking and all the rest of it. So they're trying to come across as normal people with normal concerns. Well, yes, we're concerned about drug addiction and you name it. Whatever you come up with, they've got a solution for it and they would pretend to be concerned about it. But the truth is, they really only care about Scientology, and the stated purpose of every single one of these groups in the propaganda wing is to get people into Scientology, and you can read that yourself online. It's there. So I got involved in something called Dianetics, which was what it was introduced to me as like a self-help therapy. Basically, if you do these exercises regularly, you'll become more intelligent, brighter, more alert, and all the rest of it.
So it's just like one of these books you can buy, like Increase Your Memory.
Exactly. That's how it started off, and that's how Dianetics started off. Now, Hubbard had a terrible time with Dianetics. He was actually made bankrupt, and the members don't even know this, but he was made bankrupt, and he sold Dianetics to someone for $1. Because he had this new scheme he was thinking of called Scientology. And this didn't happen overnight. It took 3 or 4 years. He bought Dianetics back eventually. And now Dianetics is a part of it. But that was my introduction. It wasn't a religion. It wasn't even a cult. It wasn't anything. And slowly, I mean, I'll be honest, in my own case, I did some Dianetics, and if you talk to anybody about your problems, you will feel better. In that situation where you've got people claiming to be able to make you feel better, and you do feel better, you tend to think it was them that did it, or at least something about the organization. So I was convinced that they'd help me. I was convinced that they would continue to help me. And that's...
So when you say they, so how did you first encounter this book?
Oh, innocently, my ex-wife bought a copy. My brother had bought a copy. He was reading it. He said, "You need to read this book."
And this is from a bookshop. It was on sale.
I don't know. I think he got dragged in for the personality test in England. This was
okay.
That's how he got the book. But he started doing like little courses. My ex-wife started doing little courses. I wasn't bothered. I'd read the book, knew nothing about the mind and how it works. Like, it's interesting they call it Dianetics, the modern science of mental health. Okay, it was written in 1950, but it's absolutely outdated. With the recent discoveries about the mind and how it works, it is outdated, except you can't tell a Scientologist that. It actually comprises of Freud. I think everyone's heard of Sigmund Freud. He had something called abreaction therapy, which means if you take a person back, a bit like hypnosis, take a person back to the earliest upset, then all the other later upsets will have less effect on the person. That's essentially Dianetics. It's also it is a bit of hypnotism as well, and a few other little bits and pieces thrown in there. Kind of a mishmash. I mean, the book itself is pretty hard to read, and when I was in Scientology, very few Scientologists had actually read it. And, they couldn't put their hand up and go, "Oh, yeah, I read that one." I actually did. But by golly, I can't remember what I read,
So you read the book, and then did you start attending, is it meetings?
Yeah, well, it was just, I went to collect my wife one day from the place, and as I was walking by, I thought, I'll just find out where it is, and I'll go and get a coffee, and then I'll go and collect her. It wasn't that easy. As I walked by, somebody on the door said, "Hey, come and do the free personality test." And I did it. And then, of course, I don't know if your listeners have heard of this free personality test, but they've been doing it in Dublin and Abbey Street for years. They've gone from Abbey Street now, so Abbey Street's a Scientology free zone, if anybody's interested.
But are there free personality tests being conducted elsewhere in the country?
They'll be going everywhere, but it's essentially in Dublin and now Fairhouse, where they've moved into what used to be the Victory Centre, and now it's the Scientology Centre and community centre, so once again, it's a way of snaking into the community. Is that a verb? Snaking? It is now. Yeah. So basically, I did the personality test. They put it down in front of me. There's all these different traits. I think the very first one has happy at the top and depressed at the bottom, and it's like a graph. And she puts it down in front of me and says, "You're depressed." And I went, "Well, no, I'm not." I said, "Well, this is what you've told us about yourself." I'm like, "Okay, yeah." Because it's 200 questions, and you answered all these questions. And I can never forget the first one, which is, "Do you make thoughtless remarks or accusations which you later regret?" Yeah, I think I do. But anyway.
I think we all do.
We all do from time to time, yeah. And the angrier we are, the more we do it. But anyway, so as I then became a staff member and learned how to administer these tests, I've got some insight into them now. And you're told, if a person says, "Oh, God, no, I'm not depressed," don't disagree with them. Point out that this is what you've told us about yourself, and then move on to the next one. Because one of those 10 points is going to hit the person hard, and that's what you're there to do. You have to do not hold back. If you're telling a person they lack confidence, don't say it with a smile. You say, "You lack confidence." So you say it so emphatically that the person, the whole personality test analysis can be very traumatic, and there have been cases of people actually taking serious steps after these personality tests have been administered. You were told in the instructions, do not hold back, because you have to make the person into a Scientologist to save them and everybody else on Earth. That's the level that they're working from. So I went through all this thing, and then they said, what you need to do is get some introductory auditing, which is what the procedure in Dianetics is. I was familiar. It was kind of interesting to me to sort of like sit in a chair and talk to someone and think back over my life. I'd never done anything like it before. So I said, okay, fine, I'll do it. But, can I do it next month? Because the only money I've got in my bank right now is a mortgage payment, which I need to make. Oh, well, you pay for that now. And once the brakes are taken off your personality, one mortgage payment will mean nothing to you. So I was convinced to ignore common sense, not make the mortgage payment, and buy some Dianetics auditing. So that's how I got started. Yeah.
You've mentioned money now, so is it an expensive process?
Oh, at the very beginning, absolutely not. Because if it was, people wouldn't go. The basic courses, I have no idea what they are right now, but they were about maybe 50, 90 possibly. Your next course, then it just jumps up to about 300, and it goes up from there. Each course in Scientology costs progressively more than the previous one. And the truth is, you actually get less and less from them, but the members wouldn't tell you that. They tell you, oh, no, it works. You know?
And that's it. Like, information is withheld, isn't it? So as you progress up the chain, I guess. Yeah.
And the other thing is, like, you're not even allowed to talk to other Scientologists about how you're doing. So even though you're supposed to be getting these, like, as I mentioned earlier, the limitless potential, all these abilities are meant to be unleashed, you're not allowed to tell anybody of all these new superpowers that you've got, Now, having said all that, Scientologists talk about it all the time. And I can remember some kids saying to me, oh, my mom once materialized a bottle of Coca-Cola in a cafe. And I'm thinking, wow, that's amazing. When I think about it now, I'm like, okay, she was in a cafe where they sell the stuff. Yeah, right. Okay, I think we know what went on there. But that's the mindset. The mindset is that, you don't start gullible, but you certainly end up that way. And you do end up buying into anything they tell you. And all the superpower, weird alien stuff, I wanted to know more about that. Now, part of you don't believe it, but you kind of accept it, if you can. Yeah.
Is it a very gradual process?
Oh,
so
yeah.
if they told you from day one, this is the core beliefs, you'd probably recoil. But
you would run away.
Drip,
you would
drip.
run away screaming, probably. But you've nailed it. That's exactly what happens. It's a slow process, but that's officially. Scientologists themselves talk amongst themselves, even though they're not allowed to do. And they do share, oh yeah, well, this person did this and this person did that, and look how successful they are and all the rest of it. So it's kept going by this, I'd have to call it, I don't know what you call it really. It's kind of like a rumor thing of how it is and how it works. The people I knew that had gone far in Scientology didn't impress me at all, to be honest, and other people have said the same thing, so...
And what kind of people then? Because you seem intelligent,
thank you.
Self-aware.
Well, here's the thing. L. Ron Hubbard himself says that he actually says we're not interested in people with mental problems. Somebody else can have them. He actually says that. The Scientologist target is able people. They don't want people that are going to present them with any problems, because obviously that would take up so much time. They wouldn't be able to get any more people in. So they want able people, and it's a fantastic job of hoodwinking your average intelligent person, because that's exactly what they do. The aims of Scientology, which I suppose we ought to say, are a world without criminality, insanity, and war. And who wouldn't agree with that? We all want that. Hey,
noble intentions.
You said it. Now, L. Ron Hubbard's craftiness, if you like, and his snarkiness was in taking those aims, getting people to think that that's what they were doing, where in actual fact all they're really doing is taking you for every penny you've got. So that's a clever scam. I think he died with $680 million in cash, in bankers' boxes, in his bedroom, which was a caravan, but anyway.
And was that, I recently watched the Alex Gibney documentary, and I can't remember if it was an ex-wife, but they were saying that one of his primary motivations for beginning it was money.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. There's a documentary you can actually watch on YouTube, and it was made by Granada, the English TV crowd. And the guy who made the program tracked Hubbard down to a port, I think it was in Morocco. If I get anything wrong here, I do stand corrected. But you can watch this on YouTube. It's a fascinating black and white documentary made in, I think, about 1966, called The Shrinking World of L. Ron Hubbard. And he says privately, obviously the documentary is full of all kinds of fascinating stuff. Hubbard gets caught out lying on a couple of occasions, which you have to watch it just to have a laugh at the way he does it. I won't get into that. If there's time, I will. But the guy apparently found the ship at 4 a.m. in the morning, and obviously 4 a.m. is in the morning, and Hubbard was on deck smoking a cigarette. There was no other people around, and he said hello, and Hubbard invited him on board, and he didn't say who he was because Hubbard had already said that he wasn't going to be interviewed by him. But then he kind of struck up a bit of an accord, I suppose you'd say, and they chatted for a while at this deathly hour of the morning. And one of the points was when he said, "Come on, tell me the truth. It's a con, isn't it?" And Hubbard's response allegedly was, "Of course it is." And then he laughed with that Hubbard laugh. I don't know if you ever heard it, but I'm not even going to try and do it, but you know. So then his next question was, well, why? Why? And he'd apparently, again, allegedly said to the guy, well, it just makes me feel good to think that I can tell my wife that I've put another $10,000 in the bank. And that was back in 1966. So there you go.
And now, I suppose it's more of a recent thing where the Scientology, there's so many documentaries about it now, so many people criticizing it, trying to expose it. But for those people within Scientology, surely they would be aware of these criticisms. How do they square that up with?
That's an interesting one. Some of them are, and some of them aren't. Some Scientologists' job is to police the internet, and obviously they come across every criticism you can think of, but they don't believe it because it doesn't fit in with what they know about Scientology, which is this benign, wonderful organization trying to save the world. So, yeah, it's difficult for those people. When I was in, it was coincided with the release of Russell Miller's book, Barefaced Messiah, and we were told under no uncertain terms not to read that book. On another occasion, we were called into a meeting and said, do not watch BBC One tonight because there's a panorama show attacking us and it's all bad news. You don't want to watch it. So Scientologists themselves are encouraged not to look at critical information. And
would there be general obedience to those kind of instructions?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because if you don't, there's a part of this whole auditing procedure whereby they call it a security check, and if you've done something wrong, you get sec checked, as they call it, which is basically like an interrogation where they try to find out what you've been doing that you don't want anyone to know about. Very intrusive. It needs to be said as well at this point that one of the things you do when you're in Scientology is tell them everything, and they're not happy until you've told them every single little thing about yourself. And do they use it against you? Well, they claim they don't. But they do.
And you think that's, I mean, obviously there's the high profile figures like John Travolta,
totally, yeah.
Tom Cruise, so they would have divulged everything.
I think so, yeah. Something I read was that the leader of Scientology, David Miscavige, actually had some parties with some friends where they drank whiskey and laughed about the things that Tom Cruise had said in his so-called private sessions. I don't know if that's true. Again, that's just hearsay. But certainly, yeah, they would use stuff against you. It's a very cruel religion, and most of the Scientologists that advance within the organization are some of the meanest, horrible people you'd ever meet. Now, the bottom level Scientologists are some of the nicest people you'd ever meet because they actually think they're doing the world a favor, they think that they're doing good, and they're just sadly misguided and misinformed. I'd love to be able to help them, but it's not easy because they know best.
And you're saying there that Scientologists, they target able people.
Oh, yes.
But would there be a lot of vulnerable people within the lower end of the membership?
Yeah, they can get people in, but they tend not to want to waste any time on people that are not going to give something back. So, if someone comes along, I'll give you one or two examples. I think we had people when I was in that were in the dynamic salesman category, and they loved those. And you get treated. The more use they think you can be to them, the better you will get treated. So yeah, and I don't even think that they do it consciously. I think they just sort of do it automatically out of some sense of obedience to the overall aim of making the world a better place, which of course they don't.
Now, you ran a mission in Cumbria, so can you tell me a bit about that then? How did that start and what did it entail?
It was very much a similar setup to the thing on Abbey Street, where you start off, like the one in Abbey Street started off in a guy's back kitchen, and that's exactly how I started. You try and contact people, you try and sell them books, you try and get them interested, you try and recruit them for staff, and then you just build and expand from there. I think I had certainly half a dozen staff members at the height of it all. Are they in now or not? I think most of them are not, but I think one or two are, and I've apologised publicly to those for doing it. But yeah, that's what you got to do. You got to sell books. You've got to get people on course, and the courses themselves are easy enough to deliver because the person just sits there and reads the stuff. I mean, there's no, you don't. It's not like a teacher situation. The Scientology course room is very, very different to a normal course room, if we can call normal people normal.
And what was your motivation for starting it? Is it something that you gain respect within Scientology?
Well, you do, of course. See, what happened, like the organisation we were at, we were recruited to work for them. And what got me involved was like they promised I'd earn a certain amount of money per week. So I said, okay, fine, I'll quit my job and I'll sell my house and I'll move over and we'll work for you. And the truth was that I didn't make that money at all. In fact, I don't think I made that money in 3 years. And it was only 200 quid a week I was promised, and I didn't get that. So we were faced with a situation. We had a child, we had another one coming, and we were starving. So the choice was carry on like this into a future of who knows what, or get the heck out of there. So we basically decided to leave. Actually, there's a little bit more to it than that. My ex-wife used to work as a psychiatric nurse, and of course, Scientology is dead against psychiatry. So she got called in one day and told that, oh, we're very sorry, but you can't work here anymore. And she was like, why? Because you were a psychiatric nurse. Once we've destroyed psychiatry, then you can come and work for us again. So, right. So I was in a situation where I was working for them, very unhappy with the situation because I wasn't being paid. It was horrible. We were starving. My wife was no longer working for them, couldn't. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to have to take steps here. Now, there is an official way to leave a Scientology organisation, and that is to go through certain steps, see different people. Every single step of the way is designed to keep you there. So I kind of realised after 6 months they weren't ever going to let me go, and the only way out of there was to leave. So that's what I did. Having done that, I didn't think there was anything wrong with Scientology. I thought Scientology itself, the world needs to hear about it, and that's why I started the mission. So I contacted the people who ran the mission network. They knew my history already. I just gave them a little bit more, and they said, okay, fine, you can go to Edinburgh and collect a mission starter pack that's not being used up there, and you can use that to get started. I did. And this was in the late 80s, and the mission starter pack I got from Edinburgh was from the 1960s. So you can imagine how bad. Oh, it was terrible. And Edinburgh, Scotland, it rains all the time. Some of the books were like ruined by damp. And I'm like, what am I being given here? A pile of rubbish. And I should have known then, really. I should have just walked. But no, I spent another 4 years promoting Scientology and trying to get the word out there.
And so this was the mid-2000s, was it?
Well, we've now come into the 90s. By 1994, I was actually doing really well at the mission, and I was being awarded and lauded by the people who run the thing. And one of my rewards was to host an event for the northwest of England where there'd be hundreds of Scientologists. And I organised the event, and it was set up in a hotel. Everyone was going to have a sit-down meal. And I'm trying to organise this, and I said to the guy who ran the Manchester organisation, what should I do about collecting money from people for the meal? And he said, oh, it'll be okay, they'll pay you on the night. Well, I think you can guess what probably happened. The night came, everyone had the meal, and then I thought, I better start collecting money off people because I'm going to end up with a bill for this. And as I went from table to table, some people said, oh, would you mind if I send you the money next week? And it was the usual thing, people trying to not pay. I think I did collect some of the money, but I didn't collect everything. And that really knocked the stuffing out of me. It kind of quenched my zeal, you might say, for Scientology. Because how could I put my hand on my heart and get people into an organisation which was going to reduce them to the level where they go to a meal because they're ordered to go, but they can't afford to pay for it. And I think it was only something, I don't even think it was much, I think it was like tenner a head or something. I forget the exact amount. So because of that, I felt I couldn't any longer, hand on heart, introduce people to Scientology. So I stopped actually doing the mission. I stopped running the mission, which was part-time anyway, because I couldn't afford to do it full-time. And every week you got to phone in your statistics, which basically is what you've done that week. And I cut the guy short every time he called me and said, no, there's nothing to report this week. Okay, fine. And that's all I got. And that went on for 6 weeks. And then he came to visit me and said, right, that's it. You're out of here. Mission's gone. You're not running the mission anymore. Somebody else will do it. And I just heaved a huge sigh of relief to be rid of it. Having said that, I still didn't wake up to what Scientology really was. How many red flags do you need, boy? But I didn't. I didn't. I still thought Scientology was good, and it was something that I planned to go back to at some point. So I spent the next 14 years in the mind fog of Scientology. So.
And was it something then you would discuss? You would meet people and discuss it with them who weren't...
Not in that 14-year period. I tried to not mention it and keep it, you push things to the back of your mind. I think we all do, especially if it's something horrible. That's what I did. When the protests began in this country in 2008, that's when I started to take an interest in it again. First of all, I thought, why would anyone want to protest something that's good? And I was laughed at and told to do my research online. This was actually before things like Alex Gibney's movie and Louis Theroux and all the rest of it. But there was enough stuff out there that you could read stuff. Russell Miller's book, Barefaced Messiah, was fabulous. It really, really helped me. John Atack's book as well, Piece of Blue Sky. And watching videos on YouTube was the thing, yeah.
And was there a particular moment where you just said, this isn't for me?
There was. And I can't exactly remember the exact moment, but I think it was reading Russell Miller's book when I came to the part where he was going to talk about the secret stuff, that we talked about earlier. And I didn't know about the secret stuff. I didn't know about Xenu and aliens and volcanoes. And part of me is like, do you really want to read this? Because if you read this, there's no going back. That's it. So I basically took a deep breath and read that. And I'm like, that's it. And my life did change at that moment. Oh, absolutely. First of all, I got really mad, though. I got really, really angry. I rounded up every bit of Scientology stuff in the house and burnt it in a big fire.
And it must be, I guess, quite an upsetting experience to have invested so much of your life.
Oh, yeah. The sense of betrayal is incredible because you have been supportive of Scientology because you think that they're trying to create this world without criminality, insanity, and war. And Hubbard and his minions have taken that pure motive, I'd have to call it, and basically, what can you say? They've trampled it into the dirt. They've really taken your, good wishes, good intentions, and just trampled all over them. And the poor members today, the ones in Fur House right now trying to get people into Scientology, they're going to have to wake up and realize that, no, you know what's really going on? Your worst nightmare. Because you don't dare suspect. Part of you does. Part of you thinks, well, what if what the critics are saying is true? Because you still hear a whisper about the stuff. I'd actually read before I got into it that it was to be avoided like the plague. Don't ask how I got into it. But yeah, so the warning signs are there, but because you're surrounded by happy, smiley people that all say they're doing better, even though they're not. So yeah, there's a lot of things going on. It's best just to not get involved. Totally.
And with so much exposure now with the documentaries, and they present, as I said, an image of a very bizarre, but also very sinister. I mean, David Miscavige seems like he runs it with an iron fist.
Oh, he does, absolutely. I think reports have came out that he's actually physically attacked people, which it just makes for horrible reading. But going back to 1965, a judge in the High Court in England said that Scientology was corrupt, sinister, and dangerous, and that was Judge Latey, Latey. And his report is fascinating reading because it's as applicable today as it ever was.
And why do you think that? I mean, because there's so much exposure, say, in the US, that the authorities...
That's a good question.
Don't get involved.
That's a very good question. If a crime has been committed and I know about that and I go to the guards and say, hey, a crime's been committed here, they need a victim to come forward and they need evidence. They can't just take my word for it. And that's what I've run into in my own experiences. There's also another thing in America called the Second Amendment, which we can't lose sight of, but it doesn't apply to us here in Ireland, thank God. And that is this whole thing, like in America they're a religion, in Ireland they're a business. That status protects Scientology. Judges, lawyers, prosecutors, they're afraid to go up against them. And for years and years and years, so was the media. The media was afraid to go up against Scientology. Time magazine did a piece in 1990 and then spent the next few years in court, being sued. So, yeah, it could be a very dangerous game. I think when the IRS announced that Scientology was going to be treated as a religion, I think that was 1992. I might be wrong about that. But the Scientologists themselves had thousands and thousands of cases on file against the IRS, and it got so bad that the leader went along, had a meeting with the guy who was in charge, who's now retired, and said, I can make all this go away. And that was the deal on the table. Basically, he blackmailed the IRS, and maybe I might regret saying that, but that's what it looks like to me. So they're protected in the States, unlike they are here.
So it doesn't have the status of religion in Ireland?
Absolutely not. No, they're a business. They have to produce accounts. In Ireland and the UK, although they'll tell you that they are a religion in the UK, they're not. There was a court case where two Scientologists wanted to get married in a Scientology church, and the judges said, why not? And the point was made that there's no God in Scientology, and the judges said, well, there's no God in Buddhism. There's actually no marriage in Buddhism, but that's another story. At least, have I got that right? I don't know. I think I have. If I've got that wrong, I hold my hand up and I apologise. But the judges did not say that Scientology was a religion. They said that if you were a Scientologist and you want to get married in a so-called Scientology church, you should be able to. And guess what? You can get married in Tesco. So what does that make it?
Now, in relation to Ireland, what is the presence of Scientology in Ireland?
Good question. 89 Scientologists according to the census. The office on Abbey Street is now closed. They have a National Affairs office on Merrion Square, which, as I said earlier, is the propaganda wing. It's from there that all the propaganda is launched. It's a special arm of Scientology that deals with all that stuff. And then they've got this building on Fir House, which, even though it says all are welcome, I don't think I'd be allowed in. I'd love to go. They've got a cafe and, they've a cinema and they show movies. I heard, and again, this is hearsay, that kids, adolescents who went to see the movie that they showed, which I think might have been Wonder Woman, had to give their name and address. Now, what kind of whoa, hang on a second, why do I have to, did they ask for phone numbers and email addresses too? I've no idea, possibly. If you get onto a Scientology mailing list, your life will change because your front door will be just littered with Scientology stuff.
And again, to go back to the documentary, I see the ex-members being harassed by the Scientologists with the cameras, and for me it seems almost comical. They're like characters out of a Coen Brothers film. But I imagine if you're on the receiving end of that, it can be very, very intimidating.
Oh, it can be. It can be very intimidating. The other interesting thing about, there's a thing like the way normal people react to situations. And if I was, say, following you down the street and harassing you, you would tell me to get lost. Now, I'm putting that politely, but you might say something else, okay? And I might do that, unless I really wanted to annoy you, and then I wouldn't. The interesting thing is that in my own case, I gave a talk in a school, and then after the second talk, I was about to leave, and three teachers, one of whom was a friend of mine, came towards me and said, oh my God, you won't believe what they've said about you in this email. And I'm like, oh, really? Now, it turned out that email was defamatory, and I was able to sue the person who sent the email. The interesting thing is that ever since I was assaulted by a Scientologist at the Tom Cruise premiere for the film. Hang on, he changed the name of the film. It was called End of Tomorrow, Back of Beyond. I forget. Yeah, some crazy title. Anyway, I was there, had my camera in my hand, my phone, and I spotted a Scientologist, and I just turned towards him, and he came straight at me. He elbowed the phone out of my hand, and then started to stamp on it and kick the bits under a bus, which was pretty horrific. There was a guard about maybe 5 meters away. So of course I said, "Did you see that?" And he said, "Well, I heard it." Yeah, it was very, very vocal. It was The Oblivion was the Tom Cruise movie. Yeah. So I was assaulted on that occasion. I was threatened on other occasions. One in particular, I won't mention the name, but he said, what did he actually say? I forget for a second there. "You'll get what's coming to you." And I said, "Oh, really, what's that?" And he was, "Oh, you'll find out." Oh, okay. On another occasion, the same guy actually said, "I will do you." "Oh, I'll take you out of it," is what he said, yeah. So, yeah, just being critical of Scientology can have its drawbacks.
And you've recently had an injunction lifted.
That's right. Well, you see, Scientology policy itself is really toxic, and because, well, it says this: if somebody sues us, you sue them 10 times as hard. So all these things were being done to me to try and provoke me into doing something whereby they could sue me, because I was suing one of them, and "How dare you sue us? We'll get you." That's what it was all about, That's exactly, and L. Ron Hubbard himself is quoted as saying, "The purpose of the lawsuit is to harass rather than to win." And then there's another little bit, and he goes, "And if possible, ruin him utterly." So he's talking about like critics of Scientology can be ruined in the court. So I fully expected that they might come after me, but what happened, I wasn't prepared for. Myself and another critic did follow them down the street. My friend snatched leaflets from the Scientologists as they were handing them out and put them in the litter bin, which I thought was very civic-minded of him. But the Scientologists then, unbeknownst to us, went to the High Court and they got an injunction preventing us from interfering with them handing out leaflets, which it's their right to do. Let's be honest, and also from picketing, looking at them, watching them, filming them, photographing them. I could go on for hours about all the verbs that were in this injunction, and it really prevented us from doing anything if there was not only the 2 named Scientologists, but it also brought in any friends of theirs or any associates of theirs, and also on the side of us as the people named on the injunction, any agents of ours. So I mean, basically, if you just knew me, they could say that, yeah, he's your agent, he's on the injunction. And they actually did try to enforce it. There was an occasion where 2 people were having a little protest, and the Scientologists served them with a copy of the injunction and called the guards, and the guards said, "No, you got to go." Now, if they'd read the injunction, the only thing they were doing really was picketing. But of course, if you look at a Scientologist, that's in the injunction. So I felt it was totally unfair. So once we got the other court cases out the way, once we got the defamation case and the assault case out the way, because they claimed assault, then the only thing left hanging was the injunction. So in October, I took them to court. Again, I could have let it go, but I thought this is important. And the judge, once he had all the facts, agreed. He said no. And ironically, it was the same judge who gave the injunction. He didn't actually come out and say this, but by implication, if he'd known what he knew now, he wouldn't have given them the injunction in the first place. But yeah, so we got the injunction lifted, and my rights to demonstrate and protest Scientology have been returned to me. And I'd like to thank the judge for that.
And so what are your plans for the future then?
Well, having said that, I mean, one of the things I actually said in court was I really don't care if I never see them ever again. And that's the way I feel. I mean, I really don't care. But I do care that people are being hoodwinked and suckered into Scientology. The Scientologists themselves haven't got a clue that they're just like sheep, being penned by the wolf, ready to be gobbled up. So, yeah, I will absolutely continue to warn people about the dangers of Scientology. because I think someone needs to, even though we've got like loads of TV doing it, and there will be probably loads more. But it needs done. People need to be warned about the dangers of Scientology.
Well, you've certainly done that today, Pete. I want to thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you, Nathan. We have a website called ex-Scientologistisland.net and also .org, and we have a lot of information on there, and we try and keep people up to date on news on that particular site. There's a lot of others as well, but we have links on that. So
that's ex-Scientologists
Island.net. Yeah, I know it's a long one, but if you get one letter wrong, it won't come up.
Listen, thank you very much.
Thanks, Nathan.
For coming in, Pete.
Thank you.
So that was Pete Griffith, ex-Scientologist, who has recently just had the injunction lifted, and therefore he can go back to protesting against the Scientologists.